Welcome to the Screenplay Lab. I'm your host, Jeff Barker. I'm a screenwriter, and this is a podcast where we study the standalone beauty of the screenplay as an independent literary piece, not just a blueprint for the film. We take one screenplay, we deconstruct it, we break it down, we find out what we love about it, what's unique, what we can learn from it. And this week, our screenplay is Waves by Trey Edward Shults. This is a 2019 A24 cult classic that makes bold and unique choices. This is a story about tragedy and trauma and finding space in your life to live with grief. But the screenplay itself is a case study on how to use a rare story structure, and also the writer almost invents a brand new format on the page. So this is a very interesting screenplay to get into. Waves by Trey Edward Shults. 36 years old, from Texas. He grew up about 100 miles from where I grew up, near the Houston area. He broke into the movie business as an intern for Terrence Malick, including when he was working on The Tree of Life, and you can see some of that influence in his films. Shults is vocal about his family's struggles, including his absent father and his father's addiction and domestic violence. Again, these are themes that often show up in his writing and his screenplays. In fact, his first major film, Krisha, is a story about a mother coping with the pain of two children dealing with addiction. The film was shot in his hometown of Montgomery, Texas, and actually stars his aunt, who plays herself, a fictionalized version of herself. That film came out in 2015. His second screenplay and film was It Comes at Night in 2017. This is a psychological thriller / horror post-apocalyptic story about paranoia, basically. And he says that he wrote this when he was dealing with complex emotions of his father dying. Then 2019 is our film today, our screenplay today, Waves. But he's just getting started. And in less than 2 months, May of 2025, his next film is coming out. It's called Hurry Up Tomorrow. It's a psychological music thriller starring The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega. The Weeknd plays a fictionalized version of himself, just like his aunt did in his first movie. So everyone's waiting for that, excited about it. And it's another reason to go back and look at Waves and see just how brilliant this story is. Shults has established himself as someone who uses contemporary songs to amplify the storytelling, sometimes creating scenes specifically to match the hook and the beat of the song. He also employs a unique atmospheric style cinematography through his DP, Drew Daniels. They've worked together on several projects, including Waves and his upcoming movie, Hurry Up Tomorrow. So how was Waves developed? He says he pulled from grief and tragedy in his life to develop this screenplay, and he started writing it in 2017, and early on he brought in his friend, Kelvin Harrison Jr., the actor who plays Trey in the movie. He was also in his one of his other movies, the horror movie. He thought it was important to have him on board so that he could understand things beyond his scope, such as race and family dynamics, how they may look for an upper middle class African-American family. It went through extensive rewrites and redos, and the draft that we have today, we assume is the final draft. You really never know about those things. But it has about 30 to 40 extra scenes that are not in the film. And there are dozens of musical talents with 45 songs, and Shults says he aimed big and he got every artist that he wanted. Some of the contracts were not even finalized until after the shooting, and he says he was willing to go back and reshoot some of the scenes to match replacement songs because he wanted his scenes with the director of photography to match the beat of the music as it goes along. It almost plays out like a music video in a lot of ways. Frank Ocean is the marquee name here in this film. He has multiple tracks, including Godspeed and Siegfried, Kendrick Lamar, Radiohead, Tyler, the Creator, Animal Collective's in there a lot, and there's other big names. Principal photography began in July of 2018 and lasted 35 days at 50 locations. This is an intense schedule. 35 days, 50 locations. It was shot all over Broward County, Florida. And it was accomplished with a $6 million budget. And it's estimated that about half of that, $3 million alone, went just to the licensing for the music. It was released in theaters in 2019 before the pandemic and only made $2.6 million. But it has done well since on streaming. Those numbers are not disclosed, but it has become a cult classic, especially with Gen Z and younger people. They love this movie. And this is one of the cases where A24 is actually not only the distributor, but also involved in production. And that may have something to do with why the movie has done so well after its theatrical release. And here is the official logline of Waves, the screenplay. Two young couples navigate through the emotional minefield of growing up and falling in love. And here's my go at it. It's a different approach. A high school athlete's life spirals out of control, leading to a tragic event that fractures his family, forcing them to navigate grief, redemption, and a fragile path toward healing. All right, here are some statistics about the screenplay. 101 pages, 219 scenes. The runtime of the film is 2 hours and 15 minutes. So if you do the math, that's a minute and 20 seconds per page with 2.2 scenes per page. And something we've been doing in the other episodes that I think's a lot of fun is looking at the title of the screenplay and what it could possibly mean. And I found 4 meanings to the title Waves by Trey Edward Shults. First is life comes at you in waves. The uncontrollable, ever-changing nature of life. You can't avoid it. You have to learn how to ride the wave, exist in the wave. The second is the ripple effect of trauma. The choices that we make affect everyone around us, especially those in the splash zone, if we're staying with that theme. The third meaning that I came up with is the sound waves, because this screenplay is all about the music. It's dramatic, it's fluid, sometimes dictating the story, sometimes responding to the story. And the fourth title meaning that I came up with is narrative waves. This is the flow of the story like an ocean. It builds and builds and builds, and halfway through it crashes like a wave and then slowly recedes back and recovers. It's this reflection of the unique 2-act structure of the story, which we will talk about. Formatting, mechanics, and style. This is the portion of the podcast where we talk about how the screenplay is constructed and how every writer is different, and their individual screenplay has to teach us how to read that screenplay. This one has some really interesting things in it. First of all, the pages in this screenplay are black with text. I'm talking about a lot of words. It's 101 pages, which is a pretty small screenplay for a drama. Compare that with Oners' 137 pages, but here's the catch. Waves has 5,000 more words than Oners and 36 fewer pages. So how in the world did he do that? He did it with these gigantic blocks of text. Look at this page. On page 92, you can see he has 9 lines in this paragraph, followed by 10 lines in this paragraph. It's like this throughout the screenplay. And look at page 28. I mean, this reads like a novella. I mean, our eyes are most certainly going horizontal and not vertical when we look at the screenplay here. But that's not the only way he saves 36 pages, theoretically. Also, it's these dual dialogue columns, and this is what is so interesting and unique about this screenplay. He's done something here that I don't know I've seen before, at least not on this scale. 58% of all his dialogue in the screenplay consists of 2 dialogue columns. Not because people are talking over each other or talking at the same time. He's doing it so that the eyes go left to right on the page, down the page as 2 people communicate in a conversation. In other words, he's structuring the dialogue horizontally like you would read a novel, how you would read prose rather than going down the page. It takes a shift when you're reading the screenplay, but it works. It does work. We can get a good example of that here on page 12, where you see the whole family's at the table and no one's talking over each other. Start with Emily there. She says, "You're such a hypocrite. You're not even going." Then Tyler says, "It's fine. It really doesn't matter." Catherine says, and this might be the one time where she jumps in, but she's not really talking over him. In fact, it's on the next line, so it's irrelevant. She says, it doesn't matter, Emily, your practice never goes that late. Then Emily says, yeah, but I need to study. And then Catherine here, I guess he puts this one in the middle, which I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because she's talking to everyone. But then back to Emily, then to Catherine, then Emily and Tyler. And you can see that there's different characters in each column too. It's not like one column is reserved for one person. So it is a different way of doing it. And I'm sure it saved him tons of pages. I'm not sure why he wanted the screenplay to be 101 pages, or if he even cared. This screenplay is in itself a work of art, which I could tell is very important to him. And this may be a way he's showing his flair, his style. Text messages in the screenplay. This is something that all screenwriters grapple with, trying to figure out the best way to format text messages. There are a dozen or more different ways that I've seen in screenplay. Some work better than others. But in this screenplay, he has a unique way of doing it. And a story like this, with the main characters being teenagers, it has loads of text messages, as you could imagine. He uses the two-column style approach again, just like with the dialogue. Check out page 20 here. You've got Alexis and Tyler texting each other back and forth. And because we've now been trained by him in this screenplay to read left to right, it's easy to see how these text messages are connected. Alexis says, I'm getting worried. Then Tyler says, why? What's up? She says, I'm late. He says, for what? She says, my period. He says, what? So you can see it there going back and forth, rather than down the page. And it takes away a lot of white space on the page, but overall it reduces the number of pages in the screenplay. To give you a better look at it, you could check out page 40 and 41, where it's 2 pages of nothing but text messages. It's a long conversation, and it shows how it goes back and forth. And there are a couple of action lines thrown in there. So to let you know that Tyler's frustration is building and that he's pacing, he's getting upset. So it's good screenwriting and a very interesting way to show how to use text messages in your script. So Trey Edward Shults does not care about your silly white space. He is going to pound this screenplay with ink and get all of his emotions and everything he needs to get across onto the page. And even when he does a single column of dialogue, he spreads that bad boy out in a way that you usually don't see. Check out this block of text for dialogue on page 16. This is Ronald talking here. If you count the characters going across the page, you have 47 characters per line, and standard for a single block of dialogue text is 35 characters. So it's an extra 12 characters. And you may not catch that if you're just reading the screenplay, but look at that. You can tell that that looks a little different than what you're used to seeing. It's wider. It's girthy. Oh, but did we speak too soon? Because he does actually use white space, but he uses it for dramatic effect. At the height of the tragedy here on page 50, you could see we get some white space. This is when Trey and Alexis are having their confrontation. It says her head plunges to the floor. Space, 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 space. Looks like about 5 spaces. Then we get the boom. Then we get another double space. So he's using it for dramatic effect. And it really stands out given the fact that most of the screenplay is just ink. And like a frugal person who's been saving and saving and saving to buy this luxury item that they just have to have, Shults has been saving his white space for the break between Act 1 and Act 2, and he piles it in here. Check out page 54. This is the end when the story switches from one main character to the other, which we'll talk about. That's so interesting. Tons of white space to block it off. And then even going on to page 55 at the beginning of Act 2, just for good measure, gives us a little more white space. And then we get into the story, close up on Emily's face, and now we have a new main character. So far on the Screenplay Lab, we've identified 13 different ways to do montages, how they can be structured in your screenplay. There is no right way. You could do it however you want. Shults does it 2 different ways in this screenplay, including these huge blocks of text again. Here on page 42, you can see he numbers them even. We're going to see several scenes, and he describes exactly what's going on, multiple shots in these scenes. First, it's the suburb streets, then Tyler's room, then the dance, then Tyler's room again, then the dance, then Tyler's bathroom, then the dance. And you can see, if you take a look at what's being said in these paragraphs, it's very descriptive. Contrast that with what we see on page 92, where he describes another montage, but he does it in one paragraph, and he takes us through everything that we should see shot by shot. I'll just pick it up in the middle where it says, we see Emily and Luke in a variety of different places, gas stations, antique stores, etc. They buy sunflower seeds, Red Bull chips, and condoms. They go through an antique store and see old pictures, jewelry, paintings, and it goes on and on. So not all of these ended up in the film, but this is what he was wanting when he wrote the screenplay. And again, he shows us two different ways that we can format. And just because he has these gigantic blocks of text at times doesn't mean that he can't get fast. He has some velocity through the scenes. He keeps the story moving when he wants to, when he needs to. In fact, page 51 to 53, there are 28 scenes. I mean, that is moving it. That's booking it. What is that, like 9 scenes per page? So he's really moving through the story. Some other quick things that are unique to him, the unique sound effects cue, the knock, knock, knock here on page 9, you can see it's centered. That's not something that we normally see. And he uses ... as dialogue, implying that the characters don't have anything to say. They're expected to speak, but they're just staring off. This is something as a screenwriter we have over and over in our screenplays in different ways that we try to depict this. He just straight up puts it as dialogue. First example I want to show you is on page 77, where Luke obviously is lost for words. So instead of him saying anything, it's just ... And then our characters go back to back. Luke and Emily just staring at each other with nothing to say. This is how he has decided to use his palette to put this story on the paper and evoke some emotion for the reader. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. And the final mechanical thing I wanted to share is just this cute transition. Instead of fade to black, which we all know and love, he says fade to colors. And it does, in fact, fade to colors in the movie, which colors are an important part of what's going on. Early in the movie, there's a lot of dark colors, a lot of reds, because we're angry and intensity and aggression, building toward this light blue of trauma and working through that blue trauma till we get to the resolution, which is the gold and the yellows. I'm going to pause here for just a second and say that if you like this podcast, I'm so very thankful and appreciative. Would you please share it with your screenwriting friends and your filmmaking friends? And you can keep up with everything that I have going on in my life, my career, at jeff-barker.com. You can follow me on all the socials. I try to update on there regularly. Also, there's a Substack where I do an article on these screenplays, breaking them down, the written version. And if you're listening to this right now, you can always watch it on YouTube and see some of the examples and pages that we're talking about. And if you're on the go, you can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. All right, thanks for your time. Now back to the program.
Thank you for watching my dad's podcast.
And now to the always controversial direction on the page so that you can see how it's done by other screenwriters and determine if you wanted to include it in your screenplays or not. And it doesn't matter that he is a writer-director. Some of the writer-directors include more direction on the page because they want to be very clear about their vision. Some include none at all because they want this to be a literary document and they have other documents that they're going to use with the DP to determine how they're going to get this thing shot. So it really doesn't matter. But here, in this particular screenplay, it's a lot. The classic we are, we see, we follow 142 times in this screenplay. We're put in the position of the camera so that we can take in and visualize the scene. There are some interesting framing and camera directions on the page. 360 spinning is used 11 times. Here's an example of it. On page 14, it says the team goes in a big circle to warm up. The camera spins in a 360 from inside the circle, following Tyler. Soon the team breaks up into partners to warm up, and the camera switches to spin around Tyler in a 360. So this is how he uses it on the page, and this is what it looks like in the film. Of course, that's a different scene than what we just read, but it gives you a taste of what it looks like when he's describing this 360 spin around. The word camera is used 71 times in this screenplay, where he's giving specific directions about what camera or how to use the camera. On this page alone here, there are 7s. We've got 4 pushes and a shoot through and 2 pans. Throughout the screenplay, we have tilts, pushes, pans, wides, aerials. He calls for anamorphic lenses in the screenplay, which is these super wide lenses that give you this beautiful depth of field. They use the Panavision T series in this film. This is how they compress the space and make a small space seem bigger, like inside a car or inside a bedroom. This is how they have such detailed shots of the characters' faces, but extreme depth of field behind them. Also, these lenses allow you to play around a little bit and get some of these visual flares and dreamy-like visuals which do show up in the film. He calls for slow motion shots 10 times in the screenplay. Here's a good example on page 48, where it says Tyler walks through the party with strobe lights hitting everything in slow motion. The camera pans through the dance floor with kids dancing and sweating in slow motion to find Emily sitting on a couch at the back of the living room. He calls for 48 frames per second 5 times in the screenplay. Normally it's 24 frames per second. That's the classic cinematic look. Whenever you switch up like that, it can be jarring and create some emotion for the viewer, and that's what he's going for here. Good example on page 5. It says we are close up in 48 frames per second on a hand moving through the wind, hair blowing, sunlight hitting beautiful eyes, etc. Alexis turns to see Tyler watching her. They both smile. He gets very serious about aspect ratio and talks about that quite a bit in the screenplay, and it shows up in the film. Several times he goes to the 2.4:1 ratio, which is extremely wide. Normally it's at the 1.85:1, which is the standard format, that 16:9 that you're used to seeing. By doing this throughout the screenplay, the ratio gets smaller and smaller and smaller as tragedy is getting closer and closer and closer. And then at the end of the first act, it's basically a square. And you can actually notice it. I think as it's getting smaller, you probably don't notice it. But once it's a square, it's very noticeable. And that's all here in the screenplay where it calls for all of this. And then as we get into the second act and we have to deal with this grief and tragedy and get through it, it starts to expand until at the end of the screenplay and at the end of the film, it's back to the full standard. He even mentions the black bars directly on the page. Here's a note on page 47 where it says the black bars at the top and bottom of the screen, making sure we know what he's talking about, have finished closing in, and we are now in the 3:1 aspect ratio. And he calls for 2 scripted Oners, those ambitious shots where you follow people around and get pieces of conversation. One of them's here on 47, and it says, note, this will be a 1 unbroken take from the time Tyler gets out of his truck until now. As the camera pushes down the hallway, the black bars at the top and bottom of the screen begin to close in. So again, he's prompting us with the black bars, but he's also saying all these shots for the rest of this page, 1 shot. Everybody better be in their positions. Now to the writing of this screenplay, and we have to start with the music because this truly is the most beautiful part of the screenplay. And just how good he is at understanding modern music and the beats. I mean, you could tell this is a guy who probably walks around with headphones on all the time, I imagine. Let's look at this one page here, 47. It gives us a good taste of exactly what it's like in the screenplay. It says here that the beat hits and we're on the beach with Tyler at a bonfire party. And he goes on to describe it. Then you follow a little bit down and it says Tyler continues to rap with the lyrics. Then it says, on the second verse, backseat freestyle starts slowing down. So up until now, he's just been describing it as music. Now he gives us the title and the artist. Go through a little more of what's happening here. It says, Tyler takes a long sip of beer and looks around. The music continues to slow and the extreme slow motion. So the music is tied to the camera and what he's wanting to see from a directorial standpoint. Slow zoom into Tyler's face and backstreet freestyle is fading out. And a drone is taking over. So then we continue with this drone to give us a look of what's going on here. Then back to his face and the music is building. It says that she looks heartbroken, talking about Alexis. This hits Tyler right in the gut. He has something to say about it. And then America by the Shoes slams on and Tyler opens his eyes back in real time. So it's almost like a music video, how it is choreographed to mix with the beats and the hooks and hit at the right times. It's really beautiful and should give readers confidence of what the screenplay might look like when The Weeknd, his new one, comes out. And you can see why these artists want to work with him and are willing to take a certain fee to be in his films, because he handles it with such care, and he showcases it. It's not just music that's going on in the background that you don't hear. It sets the mood. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a really important part of filmmaking. But here, the music is front and center. It is showcased. This movie is two stories in one. The first half is Tyler all the way through until tragedy strikes. And the second half is his sister is the one who leads the family through recovery and reconciliation of dealing with this grief and this wave that has hit them so hard. So how do you handle a situation like that where the main character is, in fact, in the first act, but you don't really want to draw your attention to them? And here's her character introduction on page 5, and I think it's really cool. It says, Tyler heads for his room, and the camera pans past him to push into a door that is cracked open with a cat staring at us. This is Tyler's sister's room. Tyler's sister, Emily, has braces and is on her computer. We caught a glimpse of Emily before practicing with the drill team and Alexis, but more importantly, Emily is the girl we saw riding the bike during the first frames of the film. So he is really giving us some inside baseball here. He's talking to us directly, saying, remember that girl at the beginning of the screenplay, at the beginning of the film, you didn't know who she was? This is her. Remember the girl that was standing next to Alexis? Maybe you didn't even notice. She was in that shot too. And now she's in this room, but don't look too closely at her because here's a cat you need to look at. So they're trying to disguise her, but include her. And if you don't know anything going into this and you're just watching the film, it's sort of like, whoa, it's a huge shift when all of a sudden she is the main character. And he does use those bookend scenes, her riding a bicycle in the beginning of the screenplay, her riding a bicycle at the end of the screenplay. In the beginning, she's naive and childlike and innocent riding the bike. At the end of the screenplay, she is showing her authority and she has grown into this more mature person and she is driving the bike. You know, she is in charge of the bicycle. Another fascinating way that they introduce a character is Luke in the second act. You can see on page 60 a little bit of what's going on here. There's some dialogue exchanged between Emily and Luke, who eventually become boyfriend and girlfriend. But at this time, she doesn't even know his name. She's seen him before, but she doesn't really know who he is. So the dialogue tags here are boy. This is different than what we normally see. In a screenplay, we get some inside information. We're privy to characters often with privileged information before the characters are. So if this were a more traditional screenplay, they would have said who he is and maybe a little bit about him, a quick little glance at what he looks like. And then his tag would be Luke all the way down. And then he would introduce himself later on. Not here. He is boy until the end of the scene where he says, cool, I'm Luke, by the way. And then the rest of the screenplay, he's Luke. This is a common practice in prose fiction. In novels, we often don't find out about who characters are until the main character does. But again, that doesn't usually happen in screenplays. And that brings me to my next point, is that this reads like a piece of prose fiction, like a novella. A lot of interiority at play here, telling us what the characters think, how they feel, what their motivations are, rather than getting that through their actions and responses by other characters. Here's the example on page 21. It says, Ronald gives Catherine a hug and Tyler watches. There's still love in Tyler's parents' relationship, but the chemistry is a little off. It's clear that Catherine isn't as into showing affection with Ronald as he is with her. We can feel more going on with their marriage below the surface. So, and this is just one example, and you've probably picked up on a lot more of this as I've been reading some of the lines in the screenplay. His use of setting is spot on, and one of the beautiful things of this script, he does a tremendous job anchoring us in a place that feels authentic and lived in. I especially appreciate our characters interacting in unique places, such as the swimming with the manatees and on the golf course at night, tripping. It is good practice that when a scene drops into your mind, you want to rush and put it onto paper. It's okay to do that. But sometimes I like to take a moment and try to think, where is a place that could make this scene even more interesting and really challenge myself and push myself to get there? And that's where you come up with some interesting settings, and he has certainly done this here. And so many of these scenes in the screenplay are cut. I counted at least 40 scenes that have been removed from the screenplay, not part of the final film. But some of the things that aren't here, I'm actually glad aren't here, because I think that it is sort of perfect the way it is, where you have this building anxiety and trauma and explodes in the middle of the screenplay, and then we get the soft, kind, gentle recovery into dealing with this grief. For example, one of the scenes that's missing is a fight between Luke and Emily. So that definitely would have disrupted that flow, that wave, that slowly receding back. Of course, when waves recede back, what's going to happen? They're coming again, but we get stopped before that happens. Thank goodness. Also, there's a lot of teen sex in this screenplay. I mean, a lot, especially in the beginning. You know, we know that's going on, obviously, and maybe we get a little glimpse of it in the film, but it's pretty explicit in the screenplay. That's missing. There's also a scene at the bowling alley between Luke and Emily that's gone. A unique scene of Emily and her parents at a nursing home visiting her grandmother who has dementia. Also, her learning how to drive. It was a big part of the screenplay. Going to the DMV and taking that test and being able to get her license. All that's gone. But the reason why people love this movie, I believe, partly probably because of the music and how he interweaves that into the story, but also it is a really great story. And where it really shines to me is the dialogue, the exchange, the authentic dialogue between the teenagers, the authentic dialogue between teenager and parent. A great example of that is on page 43, 44, when Tyler is under the influence. He's stolen his keys back from his father's desk, and he is about to go to the after party and confront Alexis once and for all. And everyone knows, Tyler knows, his parents know, we know this is a horrible idea. Here's what it looks like in the film.
Did you just take the keys from your dad's office? Give them to me. Tyler, give me the keys.
I need to go.
You're not going anywhere. Give me the keys.
Bullshit, watch me.
Watch your mouth.
Hey, what's going on?
Tyler took the keys from your office and he's been drinking.
This is bullshit.
Don't talk to your mother like that.
She's not my mom, all right? You're not my fucking mom. My real mom is dead, all right? She doesn't talk to me like a fucking condescending bitch like you, bitch.
Shut up right now.
I am your mom.
No, you're not my fucking mom, all right?
Tyler.
I am.
You pathetic, Catherine.
Tyler, D's back.
You pathetic.
I am.
You're not a real woman.
I am.
You're not a real woman. You can't even have
your
kids.
mother,
You
Tyler.
can't even fucking have
You
kids.
say one more thing like that to her, I'm gonna come over there and lay your
Fuck
ass
you.
out.
Fuck you.
And of course, Sterling K. Brown is just amazing, one of the modern day greats, and finally getting the recognition he deserves as first on the call sheet, as a powerful lead. In fact, one of my screenplays, you always envision someone when you're writing a character. He is my go-to quite a bit. I love for him to, hey, if you know Sterling Brown, see if he wants to read my screenplay. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I want to talk about, I'm leaving this in, so I must not be kidding. Here, though, we get a good glimpse of this dynamic between father and son and how he is trying to protect his son by being hard on him in the same way his pastor father was hard on him. This is the way he knows. And his growth as a character later on is when he softens up and realizes that pushing his kids in this way is not healthy. It's not helpful. But here's an interaction, and you look at this thick block of monologue text, and here's how the wonderful Sterling K. Brown pulls it off.
I said it before, I'll say it again. The world don't give a shit about you or me. We are not afforded the luxury of being average. Gotta work 10 times as hard just to get anywhere. I don't push you because I want to. I push you because I have to. Do you hear what I'm saying, son? Do you hear what I'm saying?
And the action lines are really quite beautiful. I mean, he's a very strong writer, obviously. I like to look at the last set of action lines here at the end of the screenplay, and it sort of gives us a look at everything we've been talking about. This interiority, this prose style writing, this connection of the music to the scene and the scene to the music, the use of the colors and how they transform, the framing of the shot. And so here at the end of the screenplay it says, Emily thinks to herself, everything she's been through, all the tragedy she's experienced, all the beauty too. It's all one, and we're all connected. And that's life, and it's beautiful. The music continues to build as we push in behind Emily with her hands in the air. She looks like she's flying. The beat hits. Colors fill the screen. The same that we saw at the beginning and the middle of the film, connecting it here. Now they're all combined and flow in and out of each other in one cosmic glow. Now for the narrative elements of this story, we'll start with tone. There's a first half tone and a second half tone and a major switch up. The first half is relentless intensity, rapid pacing, conversation cadence, going. The cinematography, the sound design, all worked into the screenplay. I'm not even talking about the film. They combine to create this mounting pressure of chaos, even like we talked about, the aspect ratio closing in on us, suffocating us as a reader. This pain and this tragedy, this conclusion that we know we're driving to, something bad's going to happen. We don't know what it is, but something bad's going to happen. And then it does, and we explode into the second half, and then it becomes tender and hopeful, gentle and sweet, giving, empathetic. This doesn't erase the pain, not at all, but it finds a path to deal with the pain. It gives us a glimmer of hope and a newfound way forward. And this is why people, I believe, walk away from this film loving this movie, because they've lived through this horrible thing, but were given an ounce of hope. A couple of major themes here: the complexity of forgiveness and healing. What does it mean to forgive others? What does it mean to forgive ourselves? That's the hardest one of all. Guilt is processed on an individual basis, and that's pointed out in the screenplay and in the film. The mom processes guilt with detachment, and the father, Sterling K. Brown, processes guilt with humility and eventually surrender. And Emily, she processes her guilt through anger and avoidance. But in the end, they all move closer to dealing with this trauma and this pain by beginning to let go of the guilt. Another theme is families and generational traumas, because families not only inherit values and hopes and dreams and behaviors and habits, but they also inherit trauma and pain. The father here inherits his father's sense of overbearing and discipline in order to try to control what really can't be controlled. The interesting thing here is that Trey, when he's away from his father, he also takes on those qualities of his father, being overbearing, over-disciplined, trying to control everything in his environment, even though he can't control it. The burden of expectations is another theme. This explores the pressure placed on young men, especially, and the parents of young men, to shape them into what society deems as acceptable. This is getting better, but it's still an issue. And this can lead to stress, rebellion, destruction. Tyler's entire identity is tied up in being a star athlete, and once that cracks, he has difficulty finding himself. Toxic masculinity is a combination of expecting someone to be dominant and suppressing everything else that doesn't support that vision. So suppressing emotions and feelings. It's frowned upon to be sensitive and to feel. This is why Tyler doesn't have the skills to be able to deal with any of the obstacles in his life. And we'll look at conflict, specifically internal conflict. Tyler, his is masculinity versus vulnerability, which we just talked about. He has this overwhelming pressure to succeed in school, sports, as a boyfriend, as a son, in the family business even, and no time for emotions. That would make him weak. Emily is dealing with grief versus forgiveness. She struggles to find her voice and how she's going to fit in with this new idea of what her family can be. She's torn between the loyalty to her family and the guilt and pain associated with what happened because of a member of her family. Taylor Russell is fabulous. Sterling K. Brown's character, Ronald, his interior conflict is protection versus emotional connection. He wants to protect his family. Even his poor behavior is driven by good motives. But because of his generational pain, he believes the best way to do that is by demanding unrealistic high expectations. He doesn't acknowledge the emotional needs of his children because he wants them to be tough and disciplined. But after the tragedy, he has to come to terms with the contribution of his behavior to what happened, and he must confront his own vulnerability and tap into a more nurturing side. Looking at the structure of this story, we've talked about a couple of times. It's 2-act structure rather than the classic 3 or 5-act structure, although truly each act could be its own 3-act. It's a bifurcated story, 2 stories put together. But what's so unique about this is that it does a complete switch up. I mean, Act 1 belongs to Tyler. Act 2 belongs to Emily. You rarely see in a screenplay or a film that this is pulled off at this level of effectiveness. Switching the characters can be tricky. People feel deceived. They feel tricked. They don't like it. But in this case, it makes perfect sense and it flows naturally. And these characters are so different. Emily stepping on the stage allows us to use her gentle nature and her kindness to explore this whole other aspect of the story that we couldn't even understand because of all the intensity and the rage. Well done, Trey Edward Shults. This is a very good story, a very interesting screenplay that we're all learning from, and hear how the words look on the screen.
Beautiful morning, you're the sun of my morning, babe. Nothing but morning. Beautiful morning, you're the sun of my morning, babe. Nothing but morning. Beautiful morning, you're the sun of my morning, babe. Nothing but morning. Beautiful morning, you're the sun of my morning, babe. Nothing but morning.
And that is Waves by Trey Edward Shults. What makes this screenplay unique? The remarkable portrayal of modern day teenagers in Florida, the unique use of space and side-by-side dialogue on the page. Very interesting. The writer's deep understanding of tragedy and trauma and recovery, and then gifting us all of that in an amazing story. And then the deep connection to the music on the page and the page to the music. Please subscribe, comment, like, all that stuff. Please find me on Substack for a deeper dive of this screenplay and others. You can find me on my website, jeff-parker.com, and all of the social media sites. Please share me with your filmmaking friends and your screenwriting friends and Sterling K. Brown. And I will see you next time right here on the Screenplay Lab.
Thank you for watching my dad's podcast.